And welcome to the 31st Annual Tulane Environmental Law Summit. Every year is the first annual because it's never the same students. So the things that you see happening here are because our students want it to happen. They're the ones who take the initiative, invite the guests, raise the funds, arrange for the food. So show some love. When we here for the 31st, 32 years ago, Oliver Houck hadn't had a crazy idea that something modeled on Jazz Fest for environmental law should be tried. More programming, more diversity, more variety in the audience than you could ever actually make happen. And it happens. We're also here because for the first time we have kind of a duality of Oliver Houck. We have Oliver Houck, friend, professor, mentor, whatever. And we also have Rebecca BRATSPIES, the first environmental law chair in the Oliver Houck, the Oliver Houck Professor of Environmental Law, Rebecca BRATSPIES, who just joined us in January from City University. I'm going to let her say a few words and then make a segue, because getting the two versions of Oliver in a conversation is something I don't want to do. But we're looking forward to continued conversation at lunch in the halls, and also you will notice there are two trays of books out in the hall. Those are all books that came from Oliver's office. They would otherwise be hanging out up in the library, but they're looking for homes. Take several. It's not too early to think about homes. Rebecca, welcome to New Orleans. Take it away.
All right, thank you. Hi, everybody. So none of you are here to listen to me, and I am aware of that. But I have been asked to just tell you a little bit about myself as the first Oliver Houck chair in environmental law here at Tulane. And as you heard, I came from City University of New York, where I spent 20 years studying the city and working alongside underserved communities as they struggled for clean air, clean water, and a healthful environment. My focus of my research, of my scholarship, of my activism, and of my programming is environmental justice. The idea that all of us, no matter where we live, no matter who we are, have the right to breathe air that will not make us sick, to drink water that is clean and safe, and to live on land that isn't toxic. And that seems like it should be a low bar, and yet it is such a high bar. We are fighting those fights. I have been involved in many, many different campaigns. I'm happy to talk about them with you visually in terms of thinking about how law and regulation can be used and deployed to build social change. I'm not going to bore you with them right now, though I think they're rather interesting, but I want to get to our main event. I did want to mention that I also make environmental justice comic books that I encourage you to check out. They're beautiful and super useful in terms of teaching the next generation of environmental lawyers. I was able to do all of that work because I stood on the shoulders of giants. Environmental protection didn't used to be a thing. There was no field of environmental law. There was housing and land use law, there was tort law, there was criminal law, and if you drew a Venn diagram, right, at the center, there was this tiny little piece where maybe you could tangentially deploy these bodies of law to protect the environment. But that was basically it. Oliver Houck was instrumental in changing that. He was one of the pivotal and visionary figures who devised ways to use law and legal processes to protect the environment. And of course, can't be in Louisiana and talk about those efforts without talking about the effort to save the Tulane swamp, which I do not know how to pronounce yet. I have like such a not. I've also learned how to say Tulane rather than Tulane. Right. we owe the preservation of that incredible resource to Ollie, to his hard work, to his persistence, to his brilliant advocacy. And as the first federal laws were enacted in the 1970s, Ollie, along with many of you in this room, seized the opportunity that they made possible to orchestrate not only strategic key test cases and that have given us precedents that still we rely on today, but also to establish clinics at law schools around the country, creating a pipeline of new lawyers steeped in environmental law and eager to use those degrees to protect the public and the planet. And we see the students organizing this today as their sort of legacy. And, you know, it's so exciting to talk with the students about what their plans are and how they're using the knowledge they're gaining here to build a better world. And of course, also established the Tulane Environmental Clinic, which proudly carries forth today under the leadership of Lisa Jordan, using environmental law to protect the most vulnerable among us and to work for environmental justice. Now, I'm going to stop. I just want to say that as we put out a call for reminiscences, and I just want to share a couple of the ones that came to me that I haven't had time to pass on to Ollie. From Jonathan Weiner at Duke, remembering the great welcome that you gave him and the community that you helped build. From Amy Stein, who began her career under your tutelage. She wanted me to say that you are brilliant, passionate, and live your life in a way that inspires the rest of us.
Well,
Pat Parento, about how you nearly killed him on a train.
well, that was purposeful.
Jimmy May, those of you who don't know Jimmy May, he is one of the world's leading experts on the human right to a healthy environment and environmental constitutionalism. He wanted to say that he heard you talk about the Clean Air Act as a law student and the Clean Water Act, and your work launched his career. And your book, Taking Back Eden, especially the chapter on Tony Oposa and the miners Oposa case, started him down the path of human rights and the environment. And it did for me as well. I used that book in my class. It always inspired the students because it helped them see that change is possible, that victory is possible. It's almost a how-to manual.
He was the first children's case person, and he's a friend, and he has an amazing background. He first started out, when I knew him, he had dropped from a helicopter on a ship of logs and arrested the ship and sent it back to port. So he was a pretty innovative environmentalist. He was a great guy. And he was the first children's case, and he got it from a Georgetown Law Review article by, I forget that wonderful woman's name, who wrote
Edith Brown Weiss.
Edith Brown Weiss, exactly right. So he picked it up. He went to law school there's a man named Hilario David who threw out Marcos, who was a dictator imposed by the United States, and David was a hero of democracy, and it turned out that he was the mentor of Oposa. So when Oposa got that timber case, he was before Chief Justice David. Well, I mean, that was a laydown. But he won, and he won big, and he went on to create the Visayan Sea Squadron that protected the most fertile part of the Pacific from predation, and they took former poachers and made them the guards of the resource. And one of them, Felipe de la Casa, something like that, was murdered. Jojo, yeah, Jojo was murdered. So he came to the United States. So there's another one who came to the United States because he was Alfred Brownell, a Nobel Prize winner, came to the United States because he was under threat for what he was doing in Ghana. So I tell you, there are more than 200 deaths a year of environmental activists around the world. 200 a year.
Wow.
And mainly they happen in Brazil, they happen in undeveloped countries where indigenous people are opposing corporations. So it ain't easy being green. So let me just, I just thank you. And, what I've been doing most about Tulane is that I've been supported by everyone. I mean, it's tolerated, at least by the faculty. And when Ann and Kelly, I was working in Cuba with the Cubans trying to develop their environmental program. And there was an ex-aliado who came and approached Kelly and wanted him to get rid of me. And he forcibly kicked him out of the office. And then the next dean, when the clinic was in trouble, he went up with personally, he was going to send the PR guy up to defend it. I said, no, you got to go yourself. They won't listen to anybody else. He went up. Lisa and Bob stacked the audience with firemen and policemen and other people in the uniform. I mean, real people. And put that audience stacked. And he said, you're going to bring shame to yourself. You'll be the laughing stock, or you could be the pariah of, and pulled it off. So, you know, being smart like that, it's hard to beat. I just wanted to tell you that my life has been a series of very lucky things. Most circumstances, it was totally accidentally meeting my wife. The circumstances were extraordinary. I just have to tell you, it was completely unexpected. The next was getting into Harvard. And it was because I was an average student in a very good high school, public high school, and in New Jersey. And in the couple of winters, I ran a homemade trap line. We found a book about how to do traps and snares. And we smashed a squirrel once, and that was disgusting. And then the last one, we caught in a snare, we caught a beagle. And it howled around all night long. You could see his foots there, you know, but we cut him loose and we quit. So at that time, Harvard had an interview process where an alumni, a trusted alumni would interview you. Well, I was in, my mother drove me down to Newark, a place I only knew because it was a tough area. And I was in his office and rather imposing. He said, well, what do you do? Well, I'm in high school. Are you a good student? Yeah, pretty good, but it's a very good school. And I'm certainly not at the top. Do you swim sports? And I say, oh, I swim, but that's usually only when everybody else is finished. I said, what else do you do? And I said, well, I run a trap line. He said, oh. I started to show him the trap line. He was fascinated. I showed him how he put the big green, black law dictionary. You remember that? I put that up on a pencil and we put the eraser underneath and I showed him how the rabbit came and fed it and wham. And then I showed him the snare. Well, he was fascinated. We brought over the lamp and we cut the loop and we had the trigger and there's a figure 4 you make out of pencils. And I got this thing all set up and bing, right up there. He was fascinated. I got to college. The same things, and I went to Harvard Law School, I quit. I couldn't take the law. Green acre, black acre, fee-tail, Hadley, who pays for the widget? I could care less. And so I went down and joined the Army as a private. And they said, where do you want to go? I said, Europe. They said, if you have to go to another country, where would you like to go? I said, well, maybe I don't know, another European country. They sent me to Korea. All I knew about Korea was the Korean War. And I had been I worked in a dog kennel when I was a kid. And with a guy named Joe who kept the cats and I kept the dogs. And that was the trip. When the dogs were let out of the cage, you had a rope noose. And if you missed the head, they were loose. And they were big dogs. And so, but you gotta get them out to the runs where they could poop. And then I'd flush the troop down with a hose into a local river. That for pollution control, but that was I had fun bombing them from up high and pretending they were missiles from a cannon or something. So I had great fun there. But at the I don't know why I got into that, but that's what I did. And,
Korea.
in Korea. So what I did in Korea was I tried to make sure that the girls that were sleeping with GIs, which was necessary because there was no money to be made in Korea, but if you spoke English, you could work on the base. If you did not, the only other source was the GI. And one girl could support a family of, the cousins, the aunts, everybody. You just see them in the compound. And and I wrote a book about them because I really admired them. Then I went to Seoul, where there'd just been an overthrow of a U.S. dictator that we had supported, Syngman Rhee, and a new army general happened to come from the north, Pak Chung-hee, came in, and we were scared he was a communist. Well, he wasn't. And we had a pretty good intel working. I spoke a little Korean, but the real Koreans handled that. And then finally, I wanted to go to Vietnam. So I kept applying for Vietnam. That's what the action was. And my commanding officer finally said, I never submitted your application forward. I said, why not? You'd get killed over there. You need to go home. So I went home and went to law school and then joined the Wildlife Federation. And the first case I had was the Atchafalaya. Well, that was a kick. I mean, the first time I saw it, I fell in love with it. But the thing was, the Corps we're going to build. This is a 500,000 acre swamp, and it had been converted to housing and other crop on the top, but in the lower it was still usable, and the Corps were going to channel it in order to increase the flow. Well, engineeringly that would work for a year, and then it would fill up again, and then have to do it again, and then it would fill up again, and then have to do it again. So it was a make work project, and furthermore, it would dry the swamp. And so we finally persuaded the Corps it wouldn't work. But then I had to be here to cut a deal with the landowners who stood to make a fortune from drying out the land. So we got them to agree to purchase 50,000 acres outright in fee and to put the others on what we call E7 easement, which was tree cutting only on a sustainable basis, i.e. so many basal stems you can cut. So it would always be self. We prohibited pipelines through there, but they started driving them anyway. But so it was pretty good easement, pretty tight. But in order to do this, get this, I had to seal the deal. So I talked to John Brose, Dusty John-Becker, who I've been working with. Bro was hell on wheels on the environment, but Dusty was green. And Dusty said, well, look, why don't you try law school? So we're driving in from way out, from Western, we're way out in far side of Lafayette where we've been working. And on the road, he said, why don't you call I'll call LSU. So this is the time when the phone booths were on the side of the highway, and they had little phone books there, and you drop the coins into the swans. So I dropped the quarters in, and I called the dean, and by God, I got him. And I said, Dean, I'm looking for a job with you. He said, no, we got a process for this. So I knew that was the wrong approach. He said, where are the other law schools? He said, we're two down in New Orleans. One's called it's called Tulane. I hadn't heard either of them. And so I've been here for, I've been commuting here for 9 years and I'd never heard Tulane. So I came down and I called Loyola and the dean was out. And here's the thing. The dean was Paul Verkyle, the most conservative guy I've ever met. He used to hate rapid rail. There wasn't anything that I had in common with him at all. But what happened was, unbeknownst to me, he had holding a letter in his hand at the moment I called. He had it in his hand, and it was the resignation of his criminal law prof. And he was going to Columbia, and school was in 3 weeks open. So he said, I said, I want to come down and talk with you, and I need a place to be while I see this deal. I'm not looking for a job. I just want a place to stay while I see the deal. And then I'm going to go back to DC. So he said, why don't you come in? Well, here's the thing. The guy I was staying with was about 6'4", 5". He weighed 280 pounds easy. He was a very muscular guy. He looked like Mr. Clean. That giant, Gallagher giant, he was the perfect guy. Don Schuler, he was a perfect environmentalist, just strong, and his voice could shake the room. And Barry knew him well. And Barry Cole. Barry Cole was the witness in the very important case we had on shell dredging, proving that the shells were a mineral, and therefore the shell had to do a leasing in the leasing code. Let me tell you, this is a room full of stars. Let me tell you. I know so many of you, but we have the guy here who tried the snail darter case. We have a guy here who tried the whooping crane case. I mean, I am so flattered to be in this company. We have one of the best oralists I've ever tried to challenge, John Brooks. I mean, there's just so many people here that I admire. Rob, I don't want to name names, it's just too many. The guys said they worked in energy all their lives. It's terrific. But short of it is, I've had a hell of a time here because the next day I came in walking in Don Schuler's suit. The shoulders were out to here. The pants came up to here, and I had to tie them with suspenders. I had to stuff paper in the shoes so I could put them on. I went off, and when I went in, I looked like one of those clown acts. So the fact, I thought I was talking with the dean. I thought there were 11 faculty members. They were intimidating. There were some really bulldogs in there. And so you remember some of those, Luther? Yeah, the guy's really tough. And so I went in, and he said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm down here. I don't want to stay. I just need to solve this case. Well, what's the case about? I started telling them about the Chafalaya. They never heard of it. I talked about how valuable it was. They never heard of it. I talked about it was more biologically productive than the Everglades. They had no idea about that. I told them about what the problem was, and it wasn't going to work. You had to do some other way. Well, they were fascinated. And they said, what could you teach? Well, I said, I used to be a prosecutor. I could teach criminal law. And then I'd like to teach environmental. They never heard of environmental. I said, yeah, that's okay. And so that's the way I started. I said only a year, and I was there for 40 years. And then that year, so that's the story. That I don't know or might know or anything else, just to speak up and talk about.
Well, why don't we ask Mark?
Dude, I hope you picked up the interviewing tips. That's for success.
Your audience.
Well, that's a very friendly audience. We have the best news reporter, environmental news reporter in Louisiana with Mark Schlestein here. We have, this is a room of stars. I didn't see anybody here. We have the most fiery clinic outreach person here we've ever had. It's just been wonderful. I recognize you from so many ways. But if there are any questions or comments or any experience you had with Tulane that you want to share, I'd be delighted. Not necessarily with me, but just at Tulane. No one does.
It's the Ollie show.
Oh, okay. Well, all I can say that.
Well, I've got a question for you, because we've got all these books out of the hall. And I know that several people I've talked to today say, well, I picked up, like your, down the Batture book. They don't know that you've actually continued to write. You've got more stuff. What are you thinking now?
Well, I'm doing another Taking Back Eden was 4 cases that included Tony Oposa, MC Mehta, and other stars of the world. Tony and MC Mehta and a guy named Colin from Australia are the 3 best international environmental lawyers in the world. And by the way, I stood on the shoulders of Joe Sachs, who invented the idea of lawsuits, Dave Sive, who was the first incredible, he did Scenic Hudson and others, and Bill Rogers, who was not only an academic, but a super litigator in the Northwest and took on those dam cases and got the Indian tribes their rights after they've been deprived. So I stood on the shoulders of giants. I mean, I owe a lot to those guys. Jim was, Bill Rogers was not only brilliant, but he was very funny. He wrote these little write-ups of cases that were delirious. I mean, he just skewers them. And I adopted that attitude. The book might interest you as a Supreme Court book, because it's not a book of cases. It's a book of cases, but it's how they came up, what was involved, and then the chicanery of these guys, the absolute self-contradictory statements. Every time Scalia says, obviously it isn't obvious. and you got to look out for words like certainly, or one would have to be a fool to believe that. And that's what he used to do to O'Connor. He used to devastate her when she tried to get away from the conservative line. And she was very conservative. Have you ever read a case called Northwest Indian Cemeteries?
So that's the Supreme
Tell us
Court.
about it. Tell us about it.
Sorry?
Not all of us have read it.
Tell us about the case, Sally.
The case. The case involved a good for nothing forest road that was basically a timber cutting road that connected to obscure towns. So, but they were said the purpose was to provide transportation between these towns. Nobody drove over there anyway. It went over a very tall mountain, and the Yurok tribe had a creation practice. I mean, all the indigenous tribes had ways of worshiping nature. That's what they did. The rights of nature comes from indigenous people. In their concept of what they call Pachamama, which is like Gaia, a term for Mother Earth. Gaia had it all the way back. And Pachamama is what the South believe, which in the Yurok was a belief of total silence. You go to the hill, you sit in total silence while someone goes up and simply communicates with God and then comes back. But you need silence. And I thought if you had more silence in the world this way, the world would, actually the whole world, they would cure the world. That's what they thought. Well, the road would send trucks, constant trucks for logging up and down the road. And when that was over, cars and trucks for communication. It would break the silence. But O'Connor couldn't get it. And she said, well, they can move it a quarter of a mile away, half a mile away. They could move the road. It wasn't that far. They could move the road so that trucks wouldn't be so noisy. And she didn't get it. When I realized later, and there's a book, an article written, Justice O'Connor, friend of the law, but no friends of the Indians, or something like that, and documented her history. And it goes like this. She was the daughter of a rancher, and the Apache Wars in that era had been fierce. They went on for 10 years, very bloody. There had been ambushes and torture on both sides. And the Apache lost, and they finally jailed the leaders and said they'd be free in 5 years, and instead they gave up her life. Connor came from a background of being scared to death of Indians. So when she got this, she couldn't understand a religion that. I mean, it's understandable that she didn't understand it. Because that's the way she'd been brought up, just the way racist people, and I mean racist, but people brought up in the South thought that racism was perfectly okay. In fact, the Puritans had slaves when they Puritans settled 2 places, and one was in an island off of Nicaragua, and they had slaves there, and they enjoyed it. And when they came up north, they had slaves to Indian slaves. And they slaughtered one Indian tribe and then celebrated the other with another, and that became Thanksgiving. And Powhatan was sent by the chief to make peace with the Americans, and she did, and then ran away with one of them to England, had a child, and her brother, seeing the betrayal, started murdering the colony and was only saved when another colony came. So, I mean, America's not sweet. And I guess you've heard of Andy Jackson and his Indian Removal Act. It's in the Trail of Tears. Well, Andy Jackson was a slave owner himself. And by removing the Cherokee from the Mississippi bluff, he was able to, with a land developer, develop the city of Memphis. And now we have Jackson Square in Louisiana because he was a hero of New Orleans. Well, he was a mixed bag.
The cemeteries case, right?
So we have the Supreme Court book, and tell us about the other book too.
Well, one is a really interesting cases. The heroes in Louisiana are people, not the lawyers.
What's the title of the book, Ollie?
Beg pardon?
Title of the book.
The Waking Up the Dream State. And by waking up, these cases woke up Louisiana to this idea of environmentalism, and they include some disastrous cases, one down in Calcasieu, which involved industry poisoning local people, and they lost, but they really started the movement because it was the first people who opposed this kind of thing. And there was the Vieux Carré case that Bill Borrett and Dick Kabamba did. And afterwards, Bill couldn't get a job. He committed suicide. And Bill wasn't able to work for any major law firm, so he went out on his own. So it was difficult. The Lee Pontchartrain, which was a hell of a shot, and done by Mike Osborne, and finally got it out of there. There was Shintech, a big case upriver, poison. Some of you might have participated in that, but that was that was the first of the big chemical cases that we won, and they won on racial justice grounds. Let me see. The governor of Louisiana was, at that time, the son of another governor who had been.
Is it Mike Foster?
Mike Foster. Mike Foster, Senior, was the head of was part of the. The decision that said separate but equal. I mean, it was a separate but equal decision. And Mike was here then. So when we tried to bring an environmental case, he'd say, "Oh, this old poison. I mean, I drank that poison when I smelled that poison when I was in the field. Never hurt me." And he hired a local lawyer, Glad Jones, to post a chemical plant near his property. I mean, it was fairly scumbag. But oh, this is rich. He was to be, the governor was down to greet the incoming president of Tulane, Scott Cowan. Scott had been a football player and he was straight up. And the first thing he did, now we're here to meet the coup, mayor. And by the way, he said, first thing you got to do is get rid of that goddamn plane. They're going to quote this. They're going to send down planes and bomb Louisiana. They're destroying industry. You're not going to have a job and all this shit. So finally, in Cuba at that time, when I came home, I heard about this, and when the next faculty meeting when he came over to talk about what he was going to do, I said, could we talk to you a little about the criticism of the clinic? And he said, okay. So Bob and I prepared a briefing book, showed him how many schools had clinics, what the clinic was doing and not doing, and a list of clients he could refer to, and the whole thing. And it was persuasive. And so Scott became our greatest champion. And when the clinic was under fire, he was the one that went up to the legislature and said, this is going to burn you bad. You better not do it. That great thing that you and Bob put together behind him. You put a supporting, it was like having a background of really great people. So that was kudos to you. That clinic, wonderful. And the best thing was canoeing. God, did I enjoy
that multiple times.
God, did I enjoy that with you. Bicycling. Oh, it's nice to see you here from the business school too. Thank you very much. The trips are memorable. I just, some
They were very memorable.
some were astonishingly bad. But the thing that honestly, there was never a bad trip for us. No matter how bad it was, they loved it.
Most of them even made it back.
Just a few.
Alex has his hand.
Oh, yes.
That's a great way to describe the summit as well.
Well, we've had some great people where we've had Yves Chenard, who did the Chenard Patagonia line. And the first thing he said is, look, you need to buy this shit. You can get it better at the local store. It's just got the name on it, okay? So that was one of the things he said. And he talked about developing his business, which is good. And he talked about becoming an environmentalist. He's a rock climber. And he was climbing a rock, and while he was there, poised on a ledge, he saw tiny little flowers. And he said, holy shit, this is neat. And as he went up, he saw little streams, and he said, oh, this is great. And he became an environmentalist. And he became a great funder of environmental groups.
Ollie, there's a question over here.
One more question for you. What is that giant fish over there?
What fish?
Well, let's find out.
Yeah, let's find out, right? So you describe yourself as lucky, had the career and the opportunities that you had. Well, we are the lucky ones.
Well, no, it's me too. Okay.
We've been able to learn from you, share fellowship with you, and to enjoy the incredible environmental areas that you've saved.
I can't tell you how much I've learned from you. I mean, Jane Johnson. Jane, didn't you have a little band that played at Jazz Fest one time? Yeah. You had that little scrub washed up band. Oh, that was cool.
Ollie, they're working up to something.
So, Holly. My pleasure.
The heroes are in the room, right?
Well, some of them are in the front of the room. It is my great pleasure to present you with the very first Tulane Environmental Law Society Stewardship Award.
Stewardship.
It was made by a local artist named Callie Paget. She's from Lafayette, and it is made entirely of recycled materials.
Okay.
And there it is.
It is a fish.
Goodness.
So one thing from this awards commission is going towards creating a studio for science and art projects in the community using recycled materials. It is all about carrying on your legacy.
I hope you
And
keep that in
That's-
the. I think using it as a demonstration to the students of what can be done would be the greatest honor to me. Honest to goodness.
You can argue
Everett
about that.
teacher, isn't he? Everett teacher.
Students
I
plan
think we
to
need
issue
to
this
stand
award
for
every
all.
year.
Stand for all.
I wish I could give the same applause to each of you who I know has contributed so much. Paul Brazil is maybe the student most on my wavelength I've ever had. I don't know why. But he could psych my exam. Psych my exams. I have no idea why. He was not only that, but he was damn good canoeer. And his wife is not here now. Oh, you're here. Oh, yes. I didn't recognize you. Well, God, what a pair. And you worked on Northwest Indian Territories and you worked on another one.
New Mexico.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that Harold Rehnquist case, yeah. Where he absolutely warped the statute, yeah. Well, he's a trickster, you know. One of the sitting justices said, you've got to watch for the trick with Rehnquist. There's always going to be a trick. Yeah. It's like the Socratic dialogues. There's always a trick, right? It was, you know, Socrates, he was just playing with people. Socratic dialogue was just a trick. But now the Socratic method of teaching is the classic method. I mean, you just don't lecture. I mean, when I lectured, I told stories about the background and then expected you to know the law. What I wanted to know is how that came about, and whether it was stupid or what, or something like that. And the decision, I wanted you to understand that these decisions were often biased and stupid.
Hey, Oliver, can we talk about this stuff at lunch?
Oh, sure. Wait, let's go to lunch.
Joining